Welcome to the More TV podcast. I'm Wayne. You're James.
Hi.
We've done some serious stuff. This could be quite serious, but somebody told us we needed to.
Lighten up a little
Somebody
bit.
told you, James, we needed to lighten the subject matter. So you've
Do a
gone
bit
for
more fun.
competitive parenting.
Yeah, that's right. Competitive dad, if you're a fan of Fast Show.
So what we do, more culture, theology, life. What have you read in the news that made you go, I'd like to talk about that?
So I read an article about a business in London that runs sports days and sports coaching for local schools that has banned. Parents have been banned from attending their children's sporting events in a London borough after incidents of bad behaviour from watching adults. I won't name them, but last week the partnership wrote to parents to say they would no longer be welcome at the sports events we deliver to our affiliated schools during the school day. And then they give a list of the kind of things that they do. And then the partnership's director cited, I love this bit, too many concerning behaviours to be able to continue to accommodate spectators. Examples of such behaviour included cutting across the finish lines, physically impeding runners.
Brilliant.
Actually, kind of stopping another child from winning a race so that your child can come ahead of them.
Your child is coming second. Actually, I think I'd be more likely to if my child was coming last. I think I'd stop the one who was second last, so at least my child wasn't last.
You might kind of slip out a sly leg to trip up the other child, and then they list abuse towards officials and other children. Many of those officials, the letter states, are themselves only secondary school pupils. So there we go. I thought this is it because it kind of reveals. Some of the stuff of our hearts.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. The two things are if you're a competitive person,
which of course neither of us are.
Not at all. You are always a competitive person, and then if you're a competitive person and you have children and they're involved in competition, it's kind of a heady mix. Yeah. Now we should start this by saying we obviously come from. We don't come from, but we live in a city called Bristol, where Bristol is supposedly famously relaxed. So especially the bit of Bristol we're in, where everybody's like, yeah, hey, whatever. Yeah. And so we've been through. I'm laughing. I'm just thinking the first sports day. My kids did two different primary schools. I won't name them, but the first primary school, they didn't do anything like normal. There was no running or no jumping. There was like it basically was welly throwing, wanging a welly, and it was all basically kind of made up sports. So that basically the ones who were going to be really good at running weren't always going to win. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Actually, one of my kids did win the welly wang. He basically stood there, shrugged his shoulders, and then threw this welly absolutely miles. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, come on, is this going to be in the Olympics? And now throwing the welly is so-and-so Massey representing Ireland, and he chooses to use a hunter welly, trains in the Cotswolds. But this bit, that's one thing they do, and then we've been also involved in ones where we were basically told there wouldn't be any winners.
Oh yeah, no winners. Everyone's a winner. Everyone's a winner at this sports day. We had that, and then they announced the parents' race, and basically you ended up with all the dads kind of sizing each other up. In
somebody
the first,
broke a wrist.
Yes, trying to work out, is it worth me entering this race? Because I'm not willing to come in anything other than the top three.
So two things that stand out for me from that one. There was one year, I think it was mum. Somebody broke a wrist in the parents' race in our primary school because they were going so quickly that they got to the end of the line and they just carried on. It was on grass and they slipped over and crashed into a wall. They had won. And then the other one was they used to turn up for the dad's race and line up, and there was one of the dads he was the year above me, was an international sportsman, and he he used to stand around sports day, like basically he'd be smoking and in flip-flops and in jeans, and then they'd basically go, now the father's race, and then all these Type A characters would all line up in their trainers, and he'd stand at the edge, and then they'd go, ready, and he'd take a draw of the cigarette, steady, he'd take a final draw, and then literally on go, he'd flick the cigarette, he'd flip off his flip-flops, and he'd then just start jogging, and of course he'd beat everybody by miles, and it's like, and then he'd just walk back down and put his flip-flops back on and light another cigarette. I just think, it's like...
So it would be fair to say that, I will confess that I'm pretty competitive in life. And, at my worst, have brought that into church life where I'm like, well, your church may be this size, but, kind of give me some time and, So I'm like the guy with flicking the cigarette, hoping that I'm him rather than the guy lagging at the back, and that's unhealthy. So competition is not is not necessarily a healthy thing. And we're not saying it's all unhealthy. We're just saying that it underneath it there's some stuff, and underneath the competition is the same stuff that we're talking about here that comes out in people's lives around the way that they parent their kids on sports day.
Yeah. So if we could go like competition and then into kids. So like actually, like if you're a competitive person, there's bits like it's just like if you're a competitive person, you know you are. It's hardwired into you. You can't switch it off.
Yeah.
And actually, that's like all things. That's not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
It's kind of how you're wired.
Yeah.
Where it becomes a bad thing is where it becomes something that you use to drive your sense of self and worth. So you know it's a bad thing about how you react when you lose. Now, I'm not saying you can be a competitive person and when you lose, you can feel really, really bad about it because you're a competitive person, but it's what it does to your sense of identity and self-worth.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's this idea again of like building an identity around either something you can do or something you can achieve or something that you can measure. So one of the things I do, so I'm quite competitive, but what I do is I change the rules without telling anybody else. So I might look in everybody else's eyes like I'm not doing really well, but I know the game I'm playing and I'm winning that
game. And you're winning that game. Okay.
Yeah. And
right.
and it's not like a game that I can win easily. It's a game that I need to strive to win, but it's a game. So, like for example, you talked about being a vicar and church size. Church size isn't it for me. It's about other things you ought to measure. And I won't tell you what they are.
They won't, but you're winning.
I'm winning.
So a healthy example would be, of course, the classic kind of Eric Liddell when the athletes and him saying, "When I run, I feel God's pleasure." And so that's something to hold out. You know, that in terms of competition, there's a sense in which we can compete and we can compete for God's glory. Or we can compete and we can compete out of something in our hearts that is not right, and we're filling the need in our hearts. So if you kind of are carrying massive insecurity out of childhood and how you've been formed, then actually you can end up filling that hole with people's affirmation and affection on the basis of your winning. And you often see that working its way out in professional athletes when they retire, that when they no longer have that adulation, there's nothing left to fill it, and that can often end up in people kind of falling off the rails completely in a way that they weren't during their career. And
I think it's this. So what we're dealing with here is kind of, we'll come on to what you might call idolatry, but it's how you react when it doesn't go quite right, and that reveals whether or not this is a healthy or an unhealthy thing. So I used to play hockey, and I played at quite an okay level, and I played for quite an okay club, and I was playing first, and there was a bit of a ding dong around left back between me and another guy, and the coach came to see me and basically said, "We're going to play this other guy." And he kind of, I can remember exactly what he said. He said, "You are a better defender than him, but actually the way we are playing and what we need is we need somebody who's a bit better going forward." And so actually what you give us defensively, he kind of basically said we don't need as much because the rest of the defense, in terms of midfield, but what he gives us offensively we require. Because we're not playing, I think we were playing sort of like a 4-4-2. We weren't playing with a left wing. And so actually he did it really rather well. He basically told me it wasn't because I was a bad player, it was because of the system. And actually ultimately the other guy was a better hockey player than me. But I remember at the time thinking, "Oh, I'm useless." And that's not what he said at all.
No.
And I ended up captaining the seconds in a really good club.
Yeah.
And then, but I remember just how I felt at that moment when I was dropped. And actually, and I know that in hindsight, it tipped from the disappointment of being dropped and a good competitive urge to get back to a kind of like, oh, my world has ended. Yeah. Which actually, like, I'm playing hockey on a Saturday afternoon and training on a Monday. I've got a job elsewhere and a wife, I think I wasn't. Yeah. So this isn't my life. It's just a hobby. And yet how I felt about it was like, oh, I've built a little bit of identity here.
Yeah. So not everyone listening to this will be a parent.
Nope.
They may not have been able to be a parent, or they may not yet be a parent. But we have all had the experience of being children, and when you're a child, you don't sort of grow up in a moral and worldview vacuum. Before you can even speak, you've had a whole load of values downloaded to you by your parents. And so Wayne and I are kind of fessing up to the stuff in our lives because we're aware that we don't want to have a plank sticking out of our eye whilst we're removing a speck from others, but partly because we're parents, and so we're thinking about this issue of how we can, what it means for children to grow up in kind of healthy environments, and what this says about our society, and when somebody can kind of step in front of a child as they're just about to cross the finishing line to win. I'm extrapolating it a bit with my imagination, but we're wanting to acknowledge that actually every child grows up in a conditioned environment. There is no perfect spiritual vacuum, or theologically we would say everywhere is under the curse of Genesis, and so effectively Adam and Eve are made in God's image, and then their children are made in their image.
Yeah. And so the healthy thing about being a parent is, so I think actually to say I kind of live my life through my children, there's a healthy aspect to that. It means to be invested in your child. And actually, I want my child to win or to be the best version of themselves. Again, there is a healthy aspect to that. I'm one of 4 boys, and I don't know if my brothers listen to this, but basically, as long as I'm better than my brothers, life is all right. But actually, my children are the kind of the first people in my world who I actually don't mind being better than me. Does that make sense? And that's part of. And so there's this healthy bit about parenting, which is actually I am invested in my child's life, and I do want to. Not live my life through them, but actually, like with our eldest now who's living overseas, just like to go, wow, what an amazing experience he's having. Yes. You've got the same thing, and to feel invested in it. Yeah. And with our kids, we want them to be the best version of them they can be. Yeah. What then happens is if I am not rooted fully in myself, is then that being invested in my child's life becomes I actually choose to live my life through my child. Yeah. So how my child is doing at sport, or what university they go to, or whether or not they've got into trouble in school, I think says something about who I am. Yes. And if my child succeeds, and interestingly enough, if my child succeeds at what I would like to do, well then that says something about me as well. And that's the bit where and this is, we're going to get on to idolatry. This is the whole thing about idols, is you take something that's good and you put it in the place of God, and then you worship it, and then it becomes a destructive thing.
Yes, exactly. So it is really easy in a competitive situation with your children. I know this. Our eldest child plays cricket. To wish for your child's success at the complete expense of anyone else that is on the playing field at the same time as them, that they might be the star. And the reason that's easy is not actually because that's what we should all be thinking. It's because ultimately what can happen underneath is that a need emerges within your own heart for success and for your child to be successful, and then that need can only be fulfilled by that eventuality. And so you end up wishing things that actually, in your right mind, you wouldn't wish. If somebody come up to you before you'd been a parent and said, is this a healthy thought pattern to get to? But you've slowly slid into that. And that's happened to me on a few occasions. Whereas actually, if you don't need to download something from your child's success, then you can look at the situation and say, well, I trust this situation to God, and whatever the outcome, I'm willing to receive it as a gift for my child's flourishing and thriving in this world. Yeah. And that's those two very, very different ways of, you can be on the sideline of a sporting event and outwardly appear the same way, but underneath it have two very different approaches to it.
Yeah, I've one of ours plays football, and when he first started playing football, it was mixed sex. It was brilliant, and the centre back was a girl. We nicknamed her Virgil van Dijk. Because she was a girl, she was bigger than all the boys, but she was also a really good footballer. Yeah, and actually was just a kind of innate defender. And we were like, this girl is amazing. But then as she got a little bit older, she got a little bit more disinterested. And the dad, who loves football and is quite, he'd have a competitive thing, but he was really differentiated about it in a healthy way. And there was one day in the middle of a game where he just suddenly went, I think we might be done with football. And we looked, and our centre back was doing cartwheels across the back of the box. Yeah. And he said, I'm not sure it's for her. Whereas I'd have been like, get on your feet, mark the centre forward, you know. And actually, that was such a healthy way, which is like we've played football for a bit. She's liked it, but actually, I don't think she wants to do that anymore. And that's the bit where, you know, and it's that bit different. So these parents and we don't know these parents in southwest London. That's all I'll say. But that bit where you're like, you know, you need.
Well, we do because there's part of us that knows that at our worst we are there.
Yeah. And it's that bit where we. And I think it's one of the things that they talk about in the West, especially, is that so the absence of eternity.
Yes.
So what God has set eternity in the hearts of humankind, and in the absence of eternity, the closest that we get to eternity, if we don't believe in it, is our children. So John Bandel in his novel The Sea goes, what is eternal life? He says, I think it's living on in the memories of those who you raised and who you loved. He said, realizing that one day you might live on a little bit in the memory of the ones that they raised and loved, and then eventually you become a photograph somewhere. Yeah. And I think because we have eternity deeply embedded in us, and because we don't know how to find it, we then idolize our children. And then the thing that we do in the West, and this is actually probably what's going on, is alongside the competitive thing, is we don't want them to suffer. Which is also actually a really godly thing. But in not wanting them to suffer,
and we want them to experience glory.
Yeah, and in not wanting them to suffer, we don't want them to lose. And actually, so we don't. So they talk an awful lot about our generation of parents, is that we're not very good at building resilient kids. Because we won't let them suffer pain, and we won't let them come last. Yeah, you know, unfortunately, someone's got to come last in that. You know. And there's an awful lot wrong with the education system, whereby, like, unless you get an A star or come first in the 100 meters, you know, you can feel, because actually it's wired for certain type of kids. But we're not very good, I think, as a generation in terms of building resilience, because we're idolizing these children. We don't think that they can handle suffering and pain, and you know. So there was. I remember being involved in a funeral and being told that the children weren't going to come to the funeral because they couldn't bear to come to their grandparents' funeral, and I was like, "Oh, how old are the kids?" And I was told they were like 32 and 28. I was like, "Oh, okay." But actually, it's that bit where we want to kind of, because we love our kids so much, we want to keep them away from pain and suffering and loss. Yeah, and that's part of the idolatry. But then what it means is we actually reduce their full experience of life.
Yeah, this is a good point, and we might flip it around to introduce a new friend to the podcast.
Oh yes,
Rowan Williams,
the man with the best eyebrows in Anglicanism.
Bob, I would say probably in the global church.
visible
and invisible.
Rowan, if you're listening, I'm the guy who fell asleep when you came to my theological college.
Rowan Williams was the Archbishop of Canterbury in the noughties. Brilliant,
absolutely
mind.
Wonderful man. He came to my vicar school, and we all crammed into, including all the postgrads, we all crammed into the lower common room. We basically managed to fit everybody in. I was common room president, and I kind of came in, and there was no space for me, so I sat in a windowsill. It sounds like the Book of Acts, and Williams is brilliant, but he's kind of monotone. And I think I'd actually come from hockey training, and I just basically fell asleep. And then afterwards, there was a kind of reception for him, and it was the staff, the trustees of the college in Oxford, plus the student representatives from the common room.
And you were one of those.
And the principal came to me and smiled. And a man called Alison McGrath he said, Rowan Williams, the Archbishop, said he was looking forward to meeting the common room president. And he said, which one? He said, well, who is he? And he said, so I told him, don't worry, you'll recognise him. He was the guy who slept through your lecture.
Oh, Wayne. So he's a. I'm not quite sure how he'd react if he spent a Sunday morning at B&A.
I think he'd be all right.
Yeah, probably. I'm a brilliant mind, different theological tradition to us,
but very gracious.
Very, very gracious. He wrote a book called Lost Icons, and one of the sections of that was essentially about childhood. And about some of the stuff that we've lost as a society when it comes to childhood. So he talks about childhood as kind of losing we've lost the imaginative space of childhood, and that children have become consumers and kind of that we've lost initiation. Yep. That there's pressure, choice, and responsibility, and that kind of leaves us with.
I think we've lost. Because of the world we're in, and because of what we read about in the news, we've also lost risk. Yeah, actually, children aren't allowed to take risk anymore.
One of the things that he talks about, and so what he would bring to a conversation like this would probably be an instinctive move towards the Trinity as the ground and source of our being, I suppose, would be his language, and the sense that we are people who are to, as parents, to pattern that triune love to our children, so that we are able to afford them the spaces that enable them to be those things, so they don't end up feeling like their imagination is cramped or shunned, that they're not consumers, that they do have space to go through cultural initiations in life in order to grow into adulthood, that they're not hyper pressured, and that they're able to grow up into beings who understand that they have a soul. And I suppose that kind of thinking is a really helpful antidote to what we've just been talking about, where you have a child whose performance is fulfilling their parents' needs, whereas Williams is presenting something else about what it means for us as parents to be presenting the safety of the love of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and it's understanding, I think, our role as parents. So a couple of years ago, I was in Africa for 2 and a bit weeks with a mission agency I'm a trustee of, and about a week in, and it was the same year that our eldest had gone to university and moved to Ireland, and about a week in, one of my kids said to Wendy, you seem to really miss Dad, don't you? And Wendy said, yeah. And she said, but you don't really seem to miss Jono. And Wendy went, well, I do, but no. And the child who asked the question said, what do you mean? And Wendy, if you're listening, Wendy basically took her 2 hands and intertwined her fingers and pushed them together and said, for the last 30 years, your father and my relationship has been doing this. And that's what it's supposed to do until one day one of us dies. And she said, but for the last 20 years or 19 years, my relationship with Jono has been doing this. And she separated her hands. And she said, so actually my purpose as a parent is yes, to miss him, but is actually to release him into freedom. So if I was going to theologize, it's a Roman Catholic theologian called Jack Dominion who would say, you know, when you and Nikki got married, the kingdom of James and the kingdom of Nikki come together to form one kingdom. And when your kids are born, they're born into that kingdom in kind of complete serfdom. But then the job from day one, from the moment your child is born, parenting is about retreat.
Yeah.
So that one day an independent kingdom is formed that can then meet with another kingdom. And Dominion writes, most of the troubles that people have in adult life around relationships are because their parents haven't retreated enough.
Yeah.
And that is part of, and where parents haven't retreated enough, I think it is that idolatry around I can't let you go because I need from you what I should only really be getting from God.
Yes. So we do have a scripture verse for today.
Well, very good. Yes, we do.
Exodus chapter 20, first commandment. People often forget the first commandment, don't they? They even forget a bit before how the 10 Commandments begin. I'm the Lord your God that brought you out of Egypt, a land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And that's the instruction not to have an idol, which in the currency of that time would be a physical idol, but in our culture it would be, as Keller points out, anything that is more important to you than God, anything you seek to give you what only God can give. And by that definition, even good things such as family, career, or children can become counterfeit gods, he describes them, if they take God's place in our affections and trust. And so if we have those idols in place, it's actually impossible to relate to them in a healthy way unless we're willing to set them down. Yeah.
And then what it means is it means kind of being open to knowing when and God will speak to you through his word, through the Spirit, through other people, but knowing when your idols are challenged. And a key to that is when your idols are kind of pushed over, when something goes wrong, how you react. How do you react? And if you react like, so Eugene Peterson talks about anger being a diagnostic tool that should be turned inwards. But you know, when I react angrily or when I react with fear, actually, do I pause when I get those emotions and stop and go, ooh, what's this saying about my heart? Before I then go, well, it was because that kid was faster than my kid, or whatever it might be. Yeah.
And it is possible to go through the redemption of that. So I used to get in a really bad mood if my football team, Liverpool, lost, and it would affect the way that I related to other people. This is when I was in my 20s, and I went through a kind of period of going, actually, no, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
That's not part of what it means to be redeemed. That's not part of what it means to follow Jesus. Actually, I want to be able to watch this, and I want to be able to enjoy it and get into it. But actually, it's not healthy, and it's not actually loving and kind to the people around me if, when the final whistle goes and Liverpool have lost, that I'm reacting to what's in front of me off the basis of what I've just spent my time doing.
Yeah.
So I and that, it comes out something my mum said to me when I was little, that actually, if you're going to watch sport, you've got to be able to lose.
Yeah, and it'd be wide out of. I remember, and things like you just like it's worth talking to your parents about things they remember. So there's something that's remembered from my childhood where I did a project on the Netherlands, and on the last page I made a mistake, so I tore the whole thing up. My parents were like, what? And actually, that was kind of like, and this just this innate bit of you that you possibly need challenging. And Matt Chandler, who's a pastor in the States, said he talked about having the same issues as you, James, because I don't have them. And he talked about, he said, it dawned on me, and said in my 30s that the quality of my week rise and fell based on whether or not a 6'4" muscle bound guy could catch a large egg-shaped ball on a piece of coloured turf in an end zone. And he said, I realised that's not really very healthy. Yeah,
and so they're not graven images,
no,
as they would have been in the time of Moses, but they are counterfeit gods, and if we don't deal with them, if we don't set them down, then our relationship with them will be unhealthy. We can't serve two gods simultaneously.
So I know somebody I watch Bristol Rovers with, and they are all in. Absolutely all in, and for the 90 minutes that we stand there, they will be bellowing and shouting, and referee, and all this kind of stuff, and they're like, and then we lost 4-0 on Saturday, and we lose 4-0. Yeah, they lose 4-0, and then they'll kind of just shrug their shoulders and walk home. And that's it. I was for 90 minutes. I was switched on. I was all in. But that's happened now. I'll go again next week. Whereas other people come out of the ground going, oh, and they're on the phone-ins going, sack the manager. And my friend is just like, yeah, that was a bit of fun. We lost. See you next week.
Yeah.
And it's that bit where that for that person, that's clearly not an idol. I'm sure they have other things, but yeah.
So things can matter to us. They can be important to us. We can really, really care. But the question is, do we care about them more than we care about
Jesus?
Yeah. How much time do they take up in our thoughts and in our lives? And it's very easy for us to slip into those patterns in life, generally, whether you're a parent or not. But I think one of the places to go to as we land is just going back to actually acknowledging that we're all children, and how we will have been parented ourselves, how our parents engage with us around these kind of issues is there on our mainframe, as Danny Silk would say. He's a great thinker on parenting. It's there, and therefore, where we engage in life, it will come out. You can't hide it. It's not like you can kind of build an alternate self. Unless we offer that up to the Lord for it to be healed, it's going to come out.
And it's messy. A guy I really, really rate said, "You're like a field, and in your life, your field is covered with sacred cows, a lot of which your parents will have helped you erect. And if you're going to follow Jesus, what he loves to do is just wander around your field, pushing your sacred cows over." And then he kind of smiled and said, "And the task of good discipleship is to make sure the right ones stay standing." And then he kind of shrugged his shoulders and just said, "And that goes on until the day you die." Can I give this cow a push?
So there we go. Thanks for listening and watching.